Notes 3.3 is on multiplying rational numbers. We're going to multiply positive and negative fractions, and we're going to evaluate algebraic expressions with fractions. The Common Core state standards are listed below, and the mathematical practices. To multiply fractions, you're going to multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. Cross-cancel to make it easier to solve. Make sure fractions are simplified. We're going to find each product, write in simplest form. Remember the rules for multiplying negative numbers. Same signs means if they're both positive and both negative, your answer is going to be positive. Different signs means that one's positive and one's negative, so your answer is going to be negative. So our first problem is negative 4/5 times 5/8. There's one negative in the fraction. So we don't leave it out. We're going to put our answer off to the side in an answer box, and we're going to put our negative in. And just like we would do with positive fractions, we're going to cross cancel. So 5 divided by 5 is 1, 5 divided by 5 is 1. We can also cross cancel the 4 and the 8s. Take out a 4, you're left with 1. Take out a 4, you're left with 2. Multiply going across, so you have 1 times 1, which is 1, and your new denominator is 1 times 2, which is 2. So your answer is negative 1/2. In number 2, it's negative 8/9 times a negative 5/6. So we have two negatives, so your answer is positive. When we cross cancel, we can cross cancel the 8 and the 6 by taking out a 2 from both. So you're left with a 4 and a 3. We can't cross cancel anything else, so we multiply going across, so we get 20 over 27. Number 3, we're multiplying when we have 3 numbers. There's no negatives in there, so our answer is going to be positive. Now we can cross cancel any numerator with any denominator. I'm going to go with my 4 and my 8. I'm going to take out a 4 from both, so I'm left with 1 and 2. I'm also going to do my 3 and the 15 by taking out a 3, so I'm left with 1 and 5. I can also cross cancel my 6 and 2 by taking out a 2, so I'm left with 1 and 3. Multiply going across, you're left with 3 in the numerator and 35 in the denominator. Number 4 is negative 2/15 times 8/9 times a negative 5/16. There are two negatives in the problem, so our answer is going to be positive. I'm going to cross cancel my 15s because I can take a 15 out of both and I'm left with 1. I'm going to cross cancel my 2 with my 16, so I'm left with 1 and 8. And I can also cross cancel my 8 with 8 by taking out 8 in both. I multiply going across, and I'm left with 1/9. We're going to find each product, write in simplest form. We're going to change mixed numbers to improper fractions. So whenever we're dealing with multiplication of mixed numbers, we need to convert them to improper fractions first. So I'm going to look at my signs first. I have two negatives, so that means my answer is going to be positive. Now I'm going to make them improper. So 2 times 1 plus 1 gives me 3 over 2, and I can keep my negative in there. And then I have 3 times 3, which is 9, plus 2 is 11. So that gives me 11/3. Now I can cross cancel my 3's. And that's it. So I multiply going across. Negative times a negative is a positive, and then I'm left with 11/2. 11/2 is improper, so we rename it. 2 goes into 11, close to it, 5 times. That gives you 10, and there's 1 left over, so it's 5.5. Number 6 is negative 6 2/3 times 4 1/8. One negative in the problem, so my answer is going to be negative. Now I'm going to make them improper. 3 times 6 is 18, plus 2 is 20 over 3. And then 8 times 4 is 32, plus 3 is 33 over 8. Cross cancel, I can take a 3 out from 3 and 33, so I'm left with 11 and 1. And my 20 and 8, I can take a 4 out from both, so I'm left with 5 and 2. Multiply going across, we end up getting a 55, or negative 55 over 2, which is improper. So when we rename it, 2 goes into 55 27 times, which is 54, with 1 left over. So it's negative 27.5. Next section is on evaluating expressions with fractions. So we're going to evaluate algebraic fractions when a is 3/8, b is -2/9, b is -2 2/9, and c is 7/10. Be sure to show your substitution step and solve by showing all your work. So our first problem is AB. So we're going to substitute in. A is 3/8, B is -2 2/9. But since it is a mixed number, I'm going to rewrite this right away to 9 times 2, which is 18, plus 2, which is 20 over 9. So -20 over 9, and I'm going to substitute in the -20 over 9. Now I'm going to cross cancel. My 3 becomes a 1, 9 becomes a 3. I took out a 3 from both. And my 8 and 20 I can take out a 4, so I'm left with 2 and 5. I multiply going across, and don't forget there's a negative in there. So positive times a negative is a negative. 5 times 1 is 5, and 2 times 3 is 6. So my answer is -5, 6. In number 8, it's B times C. Since I already converted in my directions, B is -20 over 9 times C, which is 7/10. I can cross cancel my 20 and 10, so I'm left with 1 and 2. Multiply going across, and we're left with 14 over 9. Since there's a negative out in front, it's a -14/9, which is improper. So 9 goes into 14 one time, which is negative, and then I have 5/9 left over. So -1 and 5/9. Next section is on multiplying algebraic fractions. We're going to find each product and write in simplest form. These algebraic fractions have variables in the numerator and the denominator, so we're going to cross cancel them just like they were numbers. So on our first one, it's 2a over b times b to the third over d. If we cross cancel and we look at the 2a and the d, they have nothing in common. But if we look at the b and the b to the third is b times b times b. So that means that they have one b in common. So I can cross off a b, and I'm left with 1 because b divided by b is 1, and I can cross off 1 in the numerator. So now multiply going across, I have 2a times b, which is b squared over d. In number 10, I have 5b over a times a squared over 10b. I'm going to start by cross-canceling my numbers. So 10 and 5 have 5 in common, so I'm going to divide out 5 from the numerator and the denominator, so I'm left with 1 and 2. I can also cross-cancel those b's, so I'm left with 1 and 1. Now with the a and the a squared, they each have one a in common, so I'm going to cross off the a and it comes a 1. A squared is a times a, so I can cross off an a, left with 1. So in my numerator, I have 1 times 1 times 1 times a, or just a, and then 1 times 2 in the denominator, which is 2. So my answer is a over 2. Number 11 is 3xy over 8 times 4y over 9y squared. So I'm going to start with my numbers, and I'm going to cross-cancel my 3 and 9 by taking out a 3, so I'm left with 1 and 3. And I'm going to cross-cancel my 4 and 8 by taking out a 4, so I'm left with 1 and 2. Now I'm going to cross-cancel my variables. I don't see any other x's, but I see a y in the numerator in the first fraction, and then 2 y's in the bottom. I'm going to take this out of exponent form and do y times y. So I can see I have 2 y's. But I can cross-cancel one of the y's in the numerator and one of the denominator. But now in the second fraction, I have another y in the numerator and a y in the denominator. I can reduce those. So any numerator with any denominator. Now be careful that you don't cross out too much. And I see an x in the numerator, and then I see a 2 times 2 in the denominator. So my answer is going to be x over 6. Remember that x is the same thing as 1x. So we could have a 1 in front of that x, or we could leave it out. Number 12 is 5ac squared over 3b squared times 6ab over 25a. Start by cross-canceling your numbers. So 5 and 25, I can take out a 5, so I'm left with 1 and 5. And 3 and 6, I'm left with 1 and 2. Now start with your variables. I see in my numerator my first fraction in a, and then my second fraction denominator in a, so I can cross-cancel. There are no C's, so I can't cross cancel there. I go to my denominator of the first fraction and I see b squared. So I'm going to rewrite that as b times b. In my numerator of the second fraction, I have a b, so I'm going to cross cancel one of those b's. So in my numerator, I see a c squared, a 2, an a, and in my denominator, I see a b and a 5. Remember, this is all multiplication. So I'm going to multiply my numerators together to give me 2, and do it alphabetically, ac squared over 5b. Make sure that your numerators and denominators don't have any common variables. Problem solving using fractions. The first hill on a certain roller coaster is 225 feet tall. The first drop on another roller coaster is about 11/20 as tall as the first roller coaster. Find the height of the hill on the second roller coaster. So if our first roller coaster is 225 feet and the second one is about 11/20, we can multiply the first one by 11/20. We can cross cancel the 20 with the 225 because using my divisibility rules, I know they have a 5 in common. So I take out a 5, I'm left with 4. I'm going to take out a 5 from 225, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of math off to the side to see what the remaining factor is. So 225 divided by 5, 4 times 5 is 20, subtract, bring down, so I get 45. Now I'm going, and I can put my 225 over 1 if you want, so now I'm going to multiply going across. 45 times 11 gives me 5, 4, add a 0 as a placeholder, 5, 4, add. So I get 495 over 4. Improper. So I'm going to divide 495 by 4. 4 goes into 4 one time, subtract, bring down. 4 goes into 9 2 times, which is 8, subtract, bring down. 4 goes into 15 3 times, which is 12, subtract, and I have a remainder of 3. So I'm going to take my remainder and put it over my divisor. So my answer is 123 3/4 feet. That is the height of the second roller coaster.